Our story begins on the 8th of June 1810 when Robert Alexander Schumann was born in Zwickau, Saxony, to parents August Schumann, a writer and a bookseller, and Johanna Schnabel. He was the youngest of the 5 Schumann children, the older 4 of whom were Edward, Carl, Julius, and Emily. As a child, Robert was brought up comfortably in a middle-class home. From a young age, he developed a liking towards literature. He was a voracious reader and loved poring over the lives and works of famous literary figures of the day. At 6 years of age, he was sent to a local school where he worked hard and was well behaved. At 7, he received his first piano lessons from Johann Kunsch, an organist and schoolmaster at the Zwickau Lyceum. Robert became fond of improvising on the piano and making musical sketches of his surroundings and even of his friends and family to much accuracy. Recognizing his talent, his father brought him an expensive grand piano where he would come up with his own compositions and arrangements. His exposure to music included going to several concerts in Karlsbad and Leipzig to hear Moscheles and Mozart's works. He was very active during his years at the Lyceum from 1820 to 1828, performing as a pianist and public speaker, organizing groups for fencing, gymnastics, and eventually a literary society. He loved romantic literature, with all its dramatic urges, particularly in the artistic and intellectual level. Poetry, love, and nature were one and the same. The sentimentalist Jean-Paul Richter was his idol. Robert mentioned Richter a lot in his letters to friends, showing his admiration for the great writer, and whose passionate style was mirrored by Schumann in his writings and his music. In 1826, Robert's life changed. The deaths of his only sister, Emily, and their father permanently wounded him and developed in him an obsessive fear of death and funerals. But as the year 1827 went on, life began to be happier again, with Robert discovering a liking towards the opposite sex.
Were I but to smile, how I would flit about her eyes! Were I but joy, how gently would I throb in all her pulses! Yes, might I be a tear, I would weep with her. And then if she smiled again, how gladly would I die on her eyelash, and gladly be no more.
He came to love 2 girls, Nanny Patch and Liddy Hempel, but his affections were displaced by the arrival of Agnes Carus, the wife of Dr. Carus at Colditz, just outside Zwickau. Agnes Carus was a gifted singer, and so the smitten Robert soon wrote songs for her and accompanied her as she sang Schubert's Lieder. After his visit to the Caruses, he took a short trip to Leipzig, Dresden, Prague, and Teplice. His holiday letters were full of lyrical prose of stories about his journeys, occasional parties with peasants, and a habit of drinking champagne along the way. He also began keeping a diary, wherein he would write his daily notes on music and his life in general.
Daily improvisation at the instrument, attempts to compose without instrument, beginnings of a piano concerto in F minor.
In 1828, upon graduation from the Lyceum, Schumann, then 18 years old, was sent by his mother and his guardian Gottlob Rudel to the University of Leipzig to pursue studies in law. His mother did not believe in the arts as a means to success in the future, and therefore wanted to make her son take another path, one that Robert had not the slightest intention of pursuing in the first place. But as all obedient sons, Robert went.
School is now behind my back, and the world lies ahead. As I went out of school for the last time, I could scarcely keep back my tears, but the joy was still stronger than the pain. Now, the true inner man must come forward and show who he is.
Before settling in Leipzig with his friend Emil Flexig and Moritz Semmel, Robert and his newfound friend Gisbert Rosen went on a trip to explore Bavaria. Rosen became a close friend of his because of their mutual admiration for the writer Richter. Along the way he met many people, including the widow of their idol and the poet Heinrich Heine. Eventually, Rosen had to go on to Heidelberg University, and Robert back to Leipzig. The farewell was emotional, and he had some bouts of depression once again. He reached Leipzig again, where the carouses settled, and met musicians and new acquaintances, including the piano teacher Friedrich Wieck with his 9-year-old daughter, and prodigy Clara. Soon he arranged for piano lessons with Friedrich Wieck. In school, Robert's love for societies became evident again, and debating, fencing, athletics, smoking, and drinking kept him busy. He was supported financially well by his mother, yet despite his promises to her and his guardian that he would study, he did not attend his lectures and classes, but spent hours improvising on the piano and writing prose in the style of Richter instead.
In my own heart, I am not quite so joyless, and what my fellow creatures cannot give me is given me by music. My piano tells me all the deep sentiments which I cannot express.
With his morose and introspective character, he clearly was not interested in the study of law, as his letter to his mother indicated. Meanwhile, his piano lessons with Wieck were ongoing, learning much from his lessons in Wieck's house, where he would also begin a close friendship with Clara. Soon Robert was composing his own works at the piano, performing in musical evenings at his lodgings. He became an avid fan of Franz Schubert's music and was also greatly depressed with the news of his idol's death. In 1829, Robert expressed his wishes to switch universities and transfer to Heidelberg, since his friend Rosen and Julius Thibaut, a law professor who was also a musician, were there. He was allowed by his mother and guardian, and off he went to his new home. Along the way he would travel to other places in Europe, often detailing to his mother his adventures, parties, and social activities. He lived the high life and most of the time overspent on miscellaneous stuff. He became quite an irregular student when it came to subjects in law, often explaining in letters to Wieck how strong the pull of music was. He became more and more lax, but fortunately, with the help of Professor Thibaut, it is made very clear at last that Robert had no inclination towards law. After a short while, Robert had to acknowledge this fact and finally wrote a letter to his mother.
My whole life has been a 20-year struggle between poetry and prose, or if you like, music and law. This battle against myself is now raging more fiercely than ever, my dear mother.
His mother promptly wrote to Wieck, concerned about the future of her son. Wieck responded, saying he could teach Robert over the next 3 years to succeed as a pianist, provided that Robert be a very studious and disciplined pianist under him. In 1830, Robert Schumann left Heidelberg and his studies in law completely. He went back to Leipzig, where his musical career would commence formally. Upon his return to Leipzig, Robert began living with the Wiecks and benefited fully from the daily exercises and lessons his teacher gave. The world of music in Leipzig was slowly opening up to him. Despite all his potential, Robert wasn't exactly the easiest student. Schumann was notorious for being moody and easy to give in to the temptations of vice. Wieck, who was firm with his students, grew annoyed with Schumann. On some occasions, Wieck would go on concert tours with his daughter, leaving Schumann alone for long periods of time. Schumann felt he was being snubbed by Wieck, which led to many arguments and disputes between him and the short-tempered Wieck. During the periods of time when the Wiecks were on tour, Schumann would often seek the aid of other piano teachers, but to no avail. In the meantime, he was at work in his literary and compositional pursuits. He worked on a novel which featured 2 characters that would frequently turn up in his diary entries, Florestan and Eusebius, who embodied the inner split personality of Robert. The Abegg variations were also published within the year 1831. He was very fond of using certain memorable letters in wordplay and anagrams, making them into musical sketches. As in the case of the Abegg variations, with the notes A, B flat, E, and G, which is named after Meta Abegg, a woman he met at a Mannheim ball. Upon the Wiecks' return from the concert tours in 1832, Robert no longer pursued lessons with Friedrich Wieck. He also decided to attempt the use of an experimental machine that supposedly strengthened each finger instead of daily finger exercises. This, however, resulted in permanent injuries to his right hand, therefore ending his career as a concert pianist. This was never discussed in detail in historic accounts, although one plausible theory suggests that it might not have been caused by a mechanism, but by nerve damage sustained from the use of mercury as a cure for syphilis, which Robert may have contracted in the previous years.
Oh Lord, why did you do just this for me? In me, the whole of music is so complete and alive that I can play only painfully, with one finger straddling the others. It's terrible, and I have suffered again from it ever since.